Darkness has many homes, but some places it never leaves. Across the world, there are stories whispered in fear, places people avoid after sunset, and histories written not in ink, but in blood. Tonight, we open the doors to 3 of them. Each tale carries one truth. The past doesn't stay buried. It waits, watching. Welcome to Horror Diaries, where every story is real and every whisper is true. Relax and turn off the lights as we delve in. Before we start, please press the subscribe button and like this video. Also, where are from and what time are you watching? 3 disturbing true stories of haunted places, cursed souls, and horrors that refuse to die. 1. The Edinburgh Vaults. Beneath the streets of Edinburgh lies another world. A world the living were never meant to find. When tourists stroll the Royal Mile, they walk over history, but also over the bones of those who never saw daylight again. For more than a century, the city kept a secret buried under its own feet. A maze of stone tunnels and vaults so dark, so airless, that even rats refused to stay. They called it the South Bridge Vaults, but locals called it the City of the Dead. It began innocently enough, a grand bridge built to unite Edinburgh's old and new towns in the 18th century. Dozens of chambers were carved beneath it, storage rooms, workshops, merchant cellars. But as the years passed, the city above forgot what it had built below. Moisture seeped in, fires burned, businesses left, and what remained became a home for those with nowhere else to go. The poor, the desperate, the outcast, and in their shadows others came, smugglers, thieves, murderers, and men who sold bodies for science and sometimes just for fun. When the vaults were finally sealed in the mid-1800s, it wasn't to preserve history, it was to bury it. But nothing stays buried forever. 200 years later, construction workers would open a passage by mistake, and what they found inside would silence even the bravest among them. Bone fragments, rusty chains, and something else in a circle of stones and blackened by fire. No one claimed it, no one could explain it. But the locals whispered, some doors should never have been opened again. Tonight, we go beneath the City of the Dead, where crimes were hidden, rituals performed, and whispers of the damned still echo through the stones. Welcome to the Edinburgh Vaults. In the late 18th century, Edinburgh was a city divided. The old town packed tight and crumbling under centuries of history, and the new town, freshly built for the wealthy, stretching toward a brighter future. To connect them, the city's engineers envisioned something grand, a bridge unlike any other, rising above the crowded streets and linking the living past with the hopeful present. It would be called South Bridge. 15 arches of solid stone towering over the Cowgate below. But what few noticed as the bridge took shape were the hollow spaces left within its foundations. Dozens of chambers, hidden vaults, perfect for storage or something darker. At first, the vaults were meant for commerce. Shops, taverns, tradesmen storing their wares. The upper levels thrived with life and laughter, but beneath the surface things were never quite right. Moisture from the river seeped through the walls. Air grew thick and cold. Fires burned low and voices began to echo in ways that felt unnatural, like the vaults themselves were listening. Merchants soon abandoned the lower chambers. The dampness ruined their goods and the smell of decay never quite left. But others, less honest, saw opportunity. When the last tradesman left, the city's shadows moved in. The poor and the desperate found shelter where the light no longer reached. Families built homes from scraps of wood and rags. Fires burned in alcoves and the air filled with the sounds of coughing and crying. By 1795, the vaults had become Edinburgh's underworld, a city beneath a city. By the early 1800s, the vaults were alive, but with a different kind of life. Beggars and thieves shared the same narrow tunnels. Brothels and gambling dens grew in the shadows, and on certain nights, if you listened carefully, you could hear faint singing, followed by screams that no one above ever heard. The city above carried on. Markets opened, churches rang their bells, and no one spoke of what was happening beneath their feet. But word began to spread. People vanished into the vaults and never came back. Merchants whispered of strange figures seen at night, dragging sacks through alleys, their faces covered in soot. And as the years turned to decades, the vaults began to take on a life of their own, feeding on fear and waiting for darker visitors still to come. The bridge was built to unite the city, but all it truly did was bury its sins. Beneath the cobblestones of Edinburgh, the air was always damp, heavy with the scent of smoke, rot, and humanity. The year was 1805, and by then, The vaults were no longer a secret, at least not to the poor souls who had nowhere else to go. Entire families lived in darkness. Mothers nursed their children beside open fires that gave more smoke than warmth. Men scavenged in the markets above, stealing food or selling scraps just to survive another night. Down here, sunlight was a memory. The walls dripped constantly, the floors turned to mud, and rats were often the first to greet newcomers. Children learned to crawl over broken glass and stone before they ever learned to walk. The people called this place home, but they also called it the underworld. The city above did not care. As long as the poor stayed out of sight, Edinburgh remained proud, polished, and proper. But what they buried beneath, what they chose to forget, festered. Soon, sickness began to spread. The stench of waste and decay clung to the air, and coughing echoed through every archway. Fires burned all night to keep the cold away, but they only made the air more poisonous. No doctors came here, no priests dared visit. Those who died below were carried out quietly and buried without names. The vaults became their grave, their final address on the city's census of the damned, and yet not everyone who lived there was innocent. Among the desperate came the cruel. The shadows beneath South Bridge became a perfect hiding place for those with darker appetites. Thieves worked the alleys by night, then vanished underground before the city guard could find them. Criminals built small kingdoms down here, taverns that served more blood than ale, rooms where debts were paid in flesh. Sometimes screams echoed through the tunnels. The poor learned not to ask where they came from. They simply whispered prayers to God or whoever would listen, and hoped the noise moved on. But there were other sounds too, stranger ones, a steady rhythm that came from the walls themselves. And no matter how many times they searched, no one ever found the source. Some said it was water, some said it was the dead, but most just stopped listening. The poorest of the poor slept with open eyes, and every candle flame was watched like a heartbeat, for if it went out, you might not wake up again. Still they stayed, because down there, even in the filth, there was something the city above would never give them: belonging. Everyone who entered the vaults belonged to them now. The bridge above was for the living. The vaults below were for everyone else. And as Edinburgh grew richer, the darkness below grew hungrier. Because the city did not know it yet, but its own nightmares were just beginning. By the early 1820s, the vaults were no longer a refuge for the poor. They had become something else entirely, a kingdom of shadows beneath the city of light. Up above, Edinburgh glittered with gas lamps and fine parlors, but beneath those cobblestones the air was thick with crime. The vaults, forgotten by the council and abandoned by the merchants, had found new masters: smugglers, thieves, gamblers, and killers. They moved like ghosts, unseen by the world above. Their footsteps echoed in secret corridors. Their whispers carried through stone like confessions. Money passed from hand to hand. Stolen goods changed owners, and blood was spilled when debts went unpaid. The South Bridge vaults had become a marketplace for sin. In one chamber, a tavern burned candles through the night, its air thick with whiskey, sweat, and smoke. Men gambled there until dawn, playing with coins they'd stolen or lives they'd soon take. In another, prostitutes worked by candlelight, their laughter masking the screams that sometimes followed. The police above rarely entered. When they did, they never came alone, and they never stayed long. The vaults twisted in ways that made men lose their bearings. A wrong turn could lead to a wall where a hallway should be, a door that vanished once closed, or a passage that led to nothing but silence. Criminals said the vaults had moods, that some nights the air turned heavy and made it hard to breathe. On those nights, even the boldest men refused to go deep. They said the tunnels whispered names, sometimes their own. In time, the vaults became known among the city's underworld as the Belly. Everything unwanted ended up there: bodies, secrets, truths too dark for daylight. Smugglers carried barrels of stolen whiskey through the tunnels, moving unseen from one end of the city to the other. Fences sold stolen jewelry to men who'd never ask questions. Even doctors came, desperate for specimens they couldn't obtain legally. The vaults had become a bridge not just between two sides of the city, but between the living and the dead. People disappeared here. Some were killed over debts. Others were taken for reasons no one dared say aloud. And when screams echoed through the chambers, the city above slept peacefully, never knowing how close its nightmares were. The poor who still lived there knew the rules. When footsteps approached, blow out your candle. When someone knocked, never answer. And when you heard your name whispered in the dark, run, because whatever was calling it wasn't human anymore. Yet even the criminals, those who had long since stopped believing in God or ghost, spoke of a presence deeper within the vaults, a room no one claimed, a place where the air itself felt alive. They said it was cursed, that men who entered alone never came back, and those who did were never the same. They spoke of symbols on the walls, carved deep into the stone, older than the bridge itself. Circles, marks, and strange words no one understood. Some said it was the work of witches. Others said the vaults were trying to speak. But the truth was darker still, because the vaults had begun to attract not just the lost and the wicked, but those who sought power in things no human should ever touch. And in their rituals, the vaults found something new to feed on: faith. Twisted, corrupted, and eager to be heard, by the year 1827, Edinburgh had become the medical capital of Britain. Its universities drew students from across Europe, eager to learn anatomy, surgery, and the secrets of the human body. But there was one problem. To study anatomy, one needed corpses, and the law allowed only those of executed criminals to be used. There were never enough. That's when men like William Burke and William Hare saw opportunity in death. They were not doctors, not scholars, just two Irish laborers who shared a rooming house and a growing hunger for money. Their story began, as all evil does, quietly. A tenant in Hare's lodging house died owing rent. Rather than lose the money, the men decided to sell the body. They carried it through the streets under cover of night to the back door of the University of Edinburgh. There they met Dr. Robert Knox, a respected anatomist who paid them £7 and 10 shillings for the corpse. No questions asked. Burke and Hare realized something at that moment. A body was worth more than a life, so they stopped waiting for people to die. Over the next year, 16 people would vanish into the shadows of Edinburgh. Poor, lonely, forgotten souls. Lodgers. Prostitutes or drunkards. Each one lured with drink, strangled in silence, and sold to the doctors who never asked where the bodies came from. Some of those victims, it said, were taken from the vaults themselves. Men and women who lived in the darkness. Unseen, unmissed, and easily erased. Burke and Hare used the city's labyrinth of closes and tunnels to move unseen. The vaults became their hunting ground, a perfect place to hide the evidence until night fell. When the murders were finally uncovered, the city reeled in horror. The trial that followed became one of the most infamous in British history. Hare was granted immunity for turning on his partner. Burke was hanged, and in a grim twist of justice, his body was given to the medical school for dissection. The public cheered, the people of Edinburgh fear lingered. The line between science and murder had been broken, and the vaults, once just a refuge for the poor, were now whispered to be cursed by the blood of the body snatchers. Even decades later, workers who dared enter the deeper chambers spoke of strange marks on the walls, small impressions that looked like human hands, pressed into the stone. They said they appeared near the spots where Burke and Hare once hid their victims. No one ever proved it, but everyone believed it. The vaults had absorbed their crimes, and with them a hunger for the human soul. From that day forward, no one entered the lower tunnels alone, because the footsteps you heard down there might not be yours. By the mid-1800s, the vaults had fallen completely silent. The merchants were gone, the poor had fled. Even the criminals had moved on to safer shadows. What remained beneath South Bridge was nothing but darkness, cold, heavy, and waiting. But nature hates a void, and in that emptiness something else crept in. The whispers began quietly. Stories of candles burning behind sealed doors, of chanting echoing through the tunnels long after midnight. At first, people thought it was just superstition, tales told by drunks and grave robbers. But then the City Watch began finding strange signs scratched into the walls, circles, runes, and symbols that no one could read. Melted wax pooled on the stone floors. The smell of burnt herbs and something fouler, iron and ash, hung in the air. Those who dared to enter said the air itself felt alive. Breathing, watching. By the late 1800s, the vaults had become a gathering place for the occult. Witch covens, spiritualists, and self-proclaimed magicians held secret meetings there, drawn by the darkness and the stories of the restless dead. Some came seeking contact with spirits, others came for power. They claimed the vaults were built on ancient ground, a crossing point between worlds, a place where the veil between life and death was paper thin. Locals spoke of rituals performed by candlelight, of blood offerings and circles of salt. And they said, If you listened closely, you could still hear the echoes of those rites long after they'd gone. One chamber in particular earned a reputation for evil, a room so black that no torch could fully chase the darkness away. They called it the Room of the Watcher. It said a coven once performed a ritual there to summon a guardian spirit. But what they brought forth wasn't a guardian at all. Witnesses described a shape that moved without sound, a shadow darker than the dark with eyes that glowed like embers in the void. They fled the vaults that night, leaving their candles burning and their circle unbroken. The next morning when they returned, they found the candles still burning. But the chalk circle had been smeared, and on the wall a single word had been carved deep into the stone. Stay. No one ever used that chamber again. Over the years, others tried to explain it away. Chemical reactions, drafts, tricks of the mind. But the stories persisted. Tour guides would later refuse to linger there, and paranormal investigators claimed that every recording captured in that room contained whispers beneath their voices, words in no known language. Even today, the vaults are used for ghost tours and historical walks. But no one stays past midnight. Because long after the tourists are gone and the lights are turned off, something still moves in the darkness. Some say it's the echo of the old rituals, others say it's the spirit the coven left behind. But the guides, they have another name for it. They call it the Watcher in the Vaults. By the turn of the 20th century, Edinburgh wanted nothing more to do with its underworld. The South Bridge vaults had become an open wound beneath the city, a reminder of poverty, crime, and the whispered evil that had once thrived there. So the city sealed them. Bricks were laid across entrances, archways filled with rubble, and the vaults were buried beneath new layers of stone and concrete. For a time it seemed that darkness had been conquered, but the vaults were not silent. In 1923, heavy rains fell on Edinburgh for 9 straight days. The River Cowgate overflowed, flooding the lower city and seeping into the buried tunnels beneath South Bridge. When workers were sent to inspect the damage, they found chambers that hadn't been opened in nearly a century. The air was foul, thick with rot and a strange metallic taste. In the flickering lantern light, they saw water rising slowly across the floors and floating within it. Bones. Hundreds of them human bones. Some ancient, blackened by age, others disturbingly new. No one could explain where they'd come from. The official report called it historic debris, but the workers refused to go back. They said the vaults didn't want to be disturbed. Those who entered complained of nausea, of feeling watched, and of sudden violent headaches that vanished the moment they stepped outside. One man, a laborer named Thomas Greer, claimed that while he was draining one of the chambers, something grabbed his ankle beneath the water. He screamed, thinking it was a rat, but when he looked down, he saw the outline of a hand, pale, thin, and impossibly long. It vanished when his lantern fell, but Thomas refused to return. He quit the next day. Word spread quickly through the city. The vaults were cursed. Every attempt to drain or repurpose them ended in accidents, collapses, sudden equipment failures, men injured by falling stones. And so the city sealed them again, this time for good. But the flood had awakened something, and it had reminded Edinburgh that beneath its grand streets and shining spires, a darker city still breathed. Years later, when archaeologists reopened parts of the vaults for historical study, they found the flood's traces still there. Black silt, broken bottles, bones fused to the walls. One chamber, however, stood untouched, dry, preserved as though the flood had flowed around it. No one could explain why. But carved above its doorway, hidden under layers of soot, was a single marking, a circle intersected by 2 lines. The same symbol found in records of 19th century occult rituals. The flood had come and gone, but the vaults had chosen what to keep. For more than a century, the Edinburgh vaults remained sealed, forgotten, their entrances hidden behind walls and shop basements, their stories whispered only by those who remembered. But time has a way of unearthing what the living try to bury. In the 1980s, during renovation work on the South Bridge area, builders broke through a thick stone wall and found themselves staring into a dark, airless chamber. It was small, damp, silent, but beyond it, a tunnel stretched away into the black, lined with ancient brickwork and the scent of centuries. They had rediscovered the vaults. News spread quickly. Archaeologists, historians, and the curious began to descend the stairways that hadn't seen light since the Victorian era. What they found was both fascinating and horrifying. The vaults were perfectly preserved in parts. Rooms still contained remnants of 18th century life. Rusted tools, shattered pottery, wine bottles sealed with wax. But alongside them were signs of something darker. Animal bones arranged in circles, candles melted into symbols, and stains on the floor that refused to wash away. It was as if the past had been waiting for them. Dr. John Andrew Henderson, one of the first modern researchers to enter, later wrote that the air felt thick, as though it had been holding its breath for 100 years. Even seasoned workers refused to go too deep. They reported sudden temperature drops, footsteps echoing behind them, and voices whispering names they never spoke aloud. One man, a surveyor, left the vaults midway through his shift, white as a sheet, claiming he'd seen a figure crouched in the corner of a sealed chamber. When he returned with others, the chamber was empty, but the dust on the floor showed footprints, bare, human, and leading nowhere. Soon, paranormal investigators began to take interest. In the 1990s, the vaults became part of ghost tours. Groups descended by candlelight to hear stories of murder, magic, and misery. But what was meant to be entertainment quickly became something else. Visitors fainted, cameras malfunctioned, and one guide swore that she saw a shadow move along the wall beside her, long and thin, like the outline of a man crawling just beyond the light. Others spoke of cold spots that felt like invisible walls of ice in the air. And in certain rooms, no sound could be heard. Not footsteps, not breathing, not even your own heartbeat. Researchers tested for natural explanations: air currents, faulty acoustics, vibrations from traffic above. But nothing matched what people experienced. It was as if the vaults themselves had memory, and when disturbed, they remembered you. Since their rediscovery, the vaults have become a bridge once more. This time between history and legend. The living walk where the dead once slept, and every visitor who descends those steps carries a part of the darkness back with them. Because what lies beneath Edinburgh was never meant to be found. It was meant to be left alone. Even after centuries of silence, some things refuse to die. The Edinburgh vaults are open now. Tourists walk their halls by candlelight. Guides speak of ghosts and tragedy, and cameras capture the shadows that dance along the walls. But the guides all agree on one thing: there is something down there that watches back. They call it the Watcher. It began in the 1990s. Shortly after the vaults reopened for public tours, a group of visitors reported the same thing on separate nights. A tall, dark figure standing motionless in the far end of a chamber. No face, just an outline darker than the darkness itself. One woman said she felt someone brush her shoulder. When she turned, there was no one there. Moments later, her friend screamed, because she'd seen a black shape standing right behind her. It vanished when the candlelight flickered. Another guide, who worked in the vaults for over a decade, claimed she refused to enter a certain room alone. Every time she did, she heard breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic, coming from somewhere behind her. Paranormal investigators brought equipment: EMF meters, infrared cameras, digital recorders. Most of it failed in the same places. Batteries drained instantly. Audio recordings picked up strange interference, like voices speaking beneath the surface of the sound. In one recording, you can clearly hear a whisper. It says a single word: leave. But the most terrifying account came from a professional television crew in the early 2000s. They were filming a documentary about Edinburgh's haunted history. Midway through a scene inside the vaults, one cameraman felt something grab his wrist. He dropped the camera, and the footage kept rolling. When they reviewed it later, they saw a brief flash, a pale hand reaching from the darkness, its fingers impossibly long, before vanishing into the shadows. The footage never aired. Since then, countless visitors have described the same experience. A feeling of being followed, a weight pressing on the chest, and eyes, unseen but unmistakably there, watching from the far end of the corridor. The Watcher has no known origin. Some believe it's the guardian spirit the coven once summoned centuries ago, still bound to its circle, still waiting for those who disturb it. Others think it's something older, something that was always there, waiting beneath the stone long before the bridge was ever built. Whatever it is, it doesn't appear to all, only to those who stay too long or ask too many questions. Guides who have worked the vaults for years say they can tell when the Watcher is near. The air changes, the candles burn lower, and suddenly no one wants to be the last to leave the room. Even the skeptics, those who laugh at ghosts and call it folklore, go silent in that moment. Because it's one thing to hear a story, it's another to feel the dark watching you breathe. And down there beneath Edinburgh, you always feel watched. Always. Today, the Edinburgh Vaults are one of Scotland's most famous attractions. Every night, hundreds of visitors descend beneath the South Bridge to walk through the cold stone corridors, to hear stories of the poor, the damned, and the lost. The tour guides hold their lanterns high, casting long shadows on the walls, and they speak of history. But what fills those tunnels now is something far older than history. In the deepest chambers, there are rooms no guide will enter, not because of superstition, but because those who have tried have come back changed. One guide, a veteran of 20 years, once said, "Down there you don't see ghosts, you feel them." Tourists still faint in the darker rooms. Some burst into tears for no reason they can explain. Many leave with scratches on their arms or necks, thin, shallow marks that appear only after they step back into the light. And always, someone will turn at the end of the tour and swear they saw a figure standing behind the group, tall still, watching. No one ever captures it clearly on camera, only the flicker of movement, the suggestion of eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The watcher, they say, still guards the vaults, bound by the rituals of centuries past, feeding on the fear of those who dare to descend. Historians call it folklore, skeptics call it mass hysteria. But those who've been down there, those who've stood in the silence, they know better. Because there's a weight in the air that no modern world can explain, a pressure that feels almost alive, like something beneath the stone still remembers your footsteps, your breath, your name. And maybe it does. The vaults have seen everything: poverty, crime, murder, worship, and resurrection. They've swallowed men whole and kept their secrets. They are older than the laws of the city, and darker than the streets above could ever imagine. At night, when the tours are over and the gates are locked, the air down there grows still again. The candles burn low, and in the blackness between rooms you can almost hear the city above, the rumble of traffic, the laughter of strangers. But beneath it all, then if you listen closely, you'll hear another sound. Slow footsteps, moving through the empty chambers, tracing the same path they've walked for centuries. And when they stop, you'll know that the watcher has found another visitor, another name to remember. So if you ever find yourself in Edinburgh and you pass by South Bridge at night, pause for a moment. Look down toward the old archways beneath the street, because beneath your feet lies a world untouched by time, where the living once hid and the dead never truly left. And somewhere in that darkness, a whisper waits to be heard again. It's been waiting for you. Story 2, The Haunted Hayride of Sleepy Hollow. Every October, thousands visit Sleepy Hollow, New York, a place steeped in ghost stories and Halloween folklore. But one night in 2010, a popular hayride attraction gave visitors more than a scare, but something they still can't explain. The Sleepy Hollow Haunted Hayride was a beloved event. Actors dressed as ghouls, fog machines, eerie lights, all for fun. But that night, as the tractor rolled through the dark forest trail, something unscripted joined the show. Witnesses said it began when the wagon passed the old mill, a real 18th century ruin said to be cursed. The fog thickened, the air dropped cold, and among the actors in costume, one figure stood too still, too silent. Dressed in a colonial soldier's uniform, the figure didn't speak or move until the wagon stopped. Then he slowly turned his head, revealing a face pale as bone with hollow eyes that reflected no light. The crowd applauded, thinking it was a performer. But the staff would later swear no one was assigned that role. Moments later, the soldier vanished into the fog. Some thought he walked off the trail. Others claimed he simply faded. When the ride ended, a few guests mentioned him casually, until they saw the staff's faces. They realized what they'd seen shouldn't have been there. Local historians later revealed something eerie. The trail had once been part of a Revolutionary War encampment. In 1779, several soldiers were executed by hanging near that same mill, and one of them was buried in uniform. Since then, guests have reported cold hands brushing their shoulders, whispers saying "march on," and lanterns flickering to life with no one nearby. One group even caught what looked like a figure hanging from the trees in their photo, though nothing was there seconds later. The organizers quietly changed the route the next year, removing the path by the mill altogether. They never gave a reason publicly, but employees said the crew refused to work that section again. Today, visitors still claim to see the Soldier of the Hollow on cold October nights, standing by the roadside as the hayrides pass, always silent, always watching. So when you visit Sleepy Hollow this Halloween, and you spot a man in old uniform by the trees, and don't wave, because he might be the one they never buried deep enough. Story 3. The Halloween Possession of Gary, Indiana. In 2011, a modest home on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, became known as one of the most haunted houses in America. Police officers, social workers, priests, all claimed to witness something beyond comprehension. And what began around Halloween would turn into a case of full-blown possession. LaToya Ammons moved into the small rental home with her 3 children. It seemed ordinary at first, until footsteps began echoing through the halls at night. Doors creaked open on their own, and a strange, oily liquid seeped from the basement walls. Dark figures pacing the rooms, whispering voices calling the children by name. But it was during a Halloween night gathering that things took a terrifying turn. Guests saw one of the children levitate, rising off the ground, eyes rolling back. The family fled the house. Police arrived and found something they couldn't explain. Their body cameras captured whispering voices when no one was speaking, and footprints burned into the floor where no one had walked. A social worker brought a priest, Father Michael Maginot, who immediately felt an overwhelming pressure inside the home. When he sprinkled holy water, the lights flickered violently. Then, in front of everyone, one of the boys walked backward up a wall and flipped over the ceiling. The event was documented. Even the hospital staff who witnessed it signed sworn affidavits. This wasn't hearsay, it was on record. Father Maginot performed 3 exorcisms on LaToya, one private, one public, and one final in secret. He said her voice changed, her eyes turned black, and something inside her spoke in tongues, a voice that wasn't hers. After the final rite, the sound stopped. The family moved far away, and the house sat empty for years. But the damage was done. Everyone who entered claimed to feel watched. In 2014, the house drew national attention. Even paranormal investigator Zach Bagans bought it, filming a documentary called Demon House. But after his own crew suffered strange accidents and sickness, Bagans destroyed the home, completely demolished. Today, nothing remains but an empty patch of land. Yet locals still avoid walking past it after dark. They say sometimes you can still hear a child's voice whispering from the lot, calling for help. The Gary, Indiana possession wasn't an urban legend. It was documented, witnessed, and recorded by the police, clergy, and government. Some say the evil left when the house was destroyed. Others believe it's still wandering the streets looking for another home.